Okay, we are at the top of the hour and we are ready to roll. I have the awesome opportunity to present our special guest today. Our special guest for this session is a recruiter, Stephen Carrillo. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, Steve?
Perfect. That's perfect.
Carrillo, thank you. Steve is a partner in the New York Life industry, and Steve will give us more background on exactly his industry and what he does. But I want to share some highlights. We're looking at his bio, and I want just to read some highlights to you. Steve began his career with New York Life in 2001, and being the expert that he is, he quickly excelled into becoming a partner in 2004. In 2016, Steve moved to San Diego, where he joined the San Diego General Office as partner. So in Steve's position and in his walk in his career, he is very, very actively involved in the recruiting process for New York Life, as he works to expand the team of financial professionals in the San Diego office. Steve works with applicants through the whole gamut as they are going, applying, looking, and landing opportunities for their careers. So he works with applicants from the initial screening process, the interview process, all the way through the onboarding process. So needless to say, Steve has tremendous experience in recruiting, interviewing, and hiring candidates. And so this session that Steve will really emphasize and help us all to walk through as a recruiter is what do recruiters look for? How can you prepare yourselves best when you are getting ready to interview for a job, or even when you are out looking for your job search? How should you have your information, prepare yourself well, and moving forward to landing that job, which we know you can do it, you will do it. Steve is here to help us with some positive tips. So I am going to unshare my screen so the whole visual can be on Steve as he talks. And Steve, if you can just share with us some hints and some tips on the job search direction and someone going through that process.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And thank you all for listening today. I've been interviewing people for 30 years. And I'm going to give you some of the things that I particularly look for when I meet with people, especially the very first time. You only get one impression. I'm sure you've heard that. Fortunately, however, in today's market, we're looking for talent. And the talent that we're looking for may not always necessarily interview well. So what I've had to evolve my process in is to understand what their skill sets are compared to what I'm looking for. Some of the things that have been very helpful for me in the very, very first interview, and this will be helpful for you to know, is this. Number one, how well have you done your homework? Regardless of your social skills, everybody can prepare by knowing exactly what they're being offered. When you walk into an interview, you should have a pretty good idea of exactly who the company is, how long they have been in business for, what they represent, what role you're going to be looking for and looking at, and besides the pay and the benefits, can you make a contribution to this company, and how, and be articulate and be specific. So what I look for in an interview the very first time is how well have the candidate have done their homework. Do they really come in prepared to actually look for a career, or are we just a job to some people? So differentiating a job and a career, in my mind, is how somebody will prepare. If it's a job, they'll come in, they won't always be dressed as well necessarily. Sometimes they won't know very basic things about the company. They will very quickly ramp up to how much money they're going to make. And in my mind, at that point, I'm talking to someone who's looking for a job. What I'm looking at is someone that comes in and says, tell me about the company more than what I know. And my next question will be, well, tell me what homework you've done. So when you go into an interview, I guarantee you, if you're one of 10 or one of 100, if you have the facts down, and there's a correlation between your ability to know the facts and your ability to articulate what you can bring to the table, if you will, if you can do that in the very, very first time you meet somebody in a short period of time, you will have an edge on somebody else. And that's constantly what I'm looking for, is somebody that has an edge. So when I have somebody come into my office, the first thing we do is we screen them. What that means basically is this. You come in and I just want to know a little bit about you, and then I'm going to start asking you questions about, what do you know about the company? What research have you done? And then I'll just ask some more general questions, and I'll ask some more questions about, give me some of the strengths that you have. I may ask someone something as simple as, hey, let me know, tell me about your junior high school, your high school, your college. Tell me some of the stuff you do outside. Our screening process is designed to get our candidates to open up, but you should know all of that very, very clearly. It should roll off your tongue very, very smoothly, and you should feel very confident that you prepared for your interview. After I go through a process and I start to understand the type of person I'm talking to, I then begin to tell my candidates about who the company is from probably a perspective they would not know of. And then what I want to find out is, did you know these things, or did you think of these things, or were these things that I'm explaining to you important to you? And if so, then explain to me. What am I trying to say? Pay attention. Pay attention, because when someone asks you a question with new information, the first thing you want to be able to do is tell them what you're thinking, but it has to be related to, here's what I bring to the table. I see what you're telling me about your company. Interesting. Here's how I can relate that to what I can do. So I'm constantly trying to figure out, A, are they prepared? And B, are they paying attention? And how well do you answer questions when you're not expecting the question? So paying attention is very, very important. Once I feel that the person whom I've interviewed with is somebody that I'd like to take to the next step, what I'll typically do is ask them to leave my office and think about exactly what they learned. And I'm going to give them something to write down on a piece of paper and give me a little bit about the feedback about what they felt they learned in the very next interview. I want to know who they talked to, what they talked about, how did they find the interview for themselves? Because what I find a lot of times is that when you go to interview and you come back the second time, if you're invited, you should have a whole different wealth of questions, a sense of, wow, this is really a company I really want to work for. And you want to come back with more questions than when you ever came in the very first time. The first time I'm asking questions, the second time you get interviewed, you should be asking a lot of questions. And so the whole process should be question and answer, questions and answer. And then your ability to answer questions that you weren't expecting puts you at edge, gives you a little bit of edge compared to the people that don't have those abilities. Now, does that mean that if you can't answer questions well, that you're not someone that we should hire? Absolutely not. But again, I will interview 400 people in my office this year. We're going to hire 20. You're going to find that throughout any company. They're going to interview a ton of people. They're looking for an edge. They're looking for people who listen well, who articulate well, and are confident in what they can bring to the table. Does that make sense? Any questions so far on what I'm saying?
This is, I'm taking notes on the, this is very good information, very good. Can I ask a question?
Please do.
Conversation. So you mentioned, and you really have stressed the importance of when someone goes in for an interview, they need to be prepared.
Absolutely.
And you said you're looking to see how much they know of the company when they come for the interview. How can someone get that information? What are some suggestions of how they can do their research to be better prepared?
Obviously today, probably like when I didn't start this, probably wasn't as available, but of course they can go to the internet, they can go to the company's website, and really you want to look at some key areas. How long have you been in business? What exactly do you do for the community? Are you the type of company that I would be proud to represent? I look at, information on different aspects of the company. Do they have a lot of complaints? Is the company authentic? Are the employees happy? Right? It's not always the money, it's whether or not you're recognized and whether or not you feel as though you're a part of a team, especially today. And so when I pull up a website, I'm looking for facts, but I'm also looking for the emotional side. So I can find it in blogs, I can go and you type in a company's name and you can go 100 directions. So I think if somebody's seriously interested in working for your company, that they should do their due diligence just as I'm going to do my due diligence on you. And so I think going in and looking at every aspect of that company and what they do, what they represent, how happy the employees. So there's a factual side, an emotional side, very accessible in today's market. So they can look at virtually anything they want to. I've interviewed people that knew things about the company I didn't know about, and that was impressive to me. They stood way out against their peers. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. That's very good.
Yeah.
And you said something else too. And by the way, I want to just open up the call for even the panelists and people who are dialing in. Kate, if you could help us in the chat area. If you have any questions to extend our conversation here with Steve, go ahead and interject. Steve, you mentioned you listen to them. You said it's two ways, right? They
Yes.
come to listen to you and you listen to them. That question, tell me a little bit about yourself. As a recruiter, you throw that out there. What are some of the types of things you're expecting, and what will really turn you off in with a answer or a lack of answer from an interviewee?
So when you ask somebody, tell me about yourself, I find that sometimes they don't know where to start. So what I'll typically do is say, hey, let's start from junior high school, college. Let's talk about your pattern. Tell me what you've done. What do you like to do? Tell me a little bit about the sports you've played, or do you belong to a club, or so. Tell me about. So sometimes I feel like if I give them a guide or some sort of a path, then I can get them to open up more. What I'm really looking for is some consistency. Like when someone says, I can remember when I was in junior high and I started playing sports, or I started playing the piano. And in high school, I started doing recitals and I played high school ball. And then when I went to college, I want to kind of see if there's some sort of a pattern, because what I've sensed a lot of times is those patterns, the stop and the start, can determine in my mind, when do you quit? Why did you quit? What caused you to quit? Because in the business that I'm in, if you're not prepared and if you're not very strong at this, you're not going to make it. So I need to make sure there's a pattern of start and stop and why. And so I'm trying to figure out, what does it take to keep you down? Why did you continue? Like I had a guy, and I was recruiting recently, and he was a football player in high school and a football player in college, and he broke his leg and he came back, and he broke his other leg and he came back, and he hurt his hip, and I'm like, this guy's not going to quit. But unless I can open him up and really figure out those patterns, I really won't know what I have. So those questions about, tell me about yourself, for me, is a pattern question. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And in a previous session, we had an alumni and a student from our university on, and we talked the subject as far as, if you don't have current experience in working in that industry, how can you get that experience? It's always better to show up with some background, some indication of showing your interest in that field, even through volunteer work or something like that.
Right.
What's your take as a recruiter on that importance of being able to demonstrate some level of experience and interest within your field?
That's a great question. So if I were new today going into a career that I didn't have the experience, but I had the passion, one thing I would suggest doing, and this is a simple thing, but maybe people that are already professionals, someone that is older than you are, maybe a parent or a friend of a parent, see if you know anyone that works in that business, first of all. It's an old-fashioned character letter. You go into an interview and say, hey, this is a career that I'm really interested in. I don't have the experience. And you go in humbly and say, I don't have the experience, but here's what I do have. I have a history of character. I have a history of learning, and I brought you something from some very professional people, and I would read those. And they'd say, you want to interview this person, you want to consider this person because I've known this person for 15 years. They don't quit. They're hardworking. They have good school ethics. They do great in school. They're great with their grades. They follow through on stuff. If I got that from somebody, that would make me consider whether or not they had experience, because long term, they'll get the experience. If I only have one position and I have 30 or 40 candidates, that may be something that may change that. But really, in today's market, it's not the smartest guy. It's the person who's willing to do the most that's going to get the job. And so again, if you're going on an interview, bring all your tools, bring all your ammunition. You're trying to get a career opportunity. Make everything that you have available to you, bring it to the table. That will stand. Don't come flippantly. Don't come nonchalantly. Come like, I want this job more than anything because this is my passion. You come that way, you will stand out. Trust me.
And with like the numbers that you shared in interviewing like 400 applicants and hiring 20, the person who wants that job, they have to stand out. They have to come.
Yeah, we have what we call a push-pull system. I'm trying to push you out, and you're going to show me how much you're going to push back. So if I'm pushing you out, I want to see if you're going to push back. So oddly enough, we have an MBA program, and the MBA program that we have is a fast track. And so what I do, and I had an interview yesterday, and I said to this young man who's very, very intelligent, I said, why in the world do you want to do this? It's straight commission, great benefits. We're a Fortune 100 company. Yes, we're straight commission, and there's a high propensity that you're going to fail. Tell me why you think you want to do this and put yourself through that. Now, so I'm pushing this guy. He comes right back at me and he says, I'm an entrepreneur. And I have dreamed about running my own type of business. And with New York Life, I don't have to pay the franchise fee. I said, great answer. And I kept going, but I'm pushing and I'm seeing to see if he's going to push back. So that's one way, you can really, solidify yourself, is that you're not afraid. Like, I know I don't have the experience. I know I'm not, but I'm not afraid of this. You can't scare me off. That's important. I call it being, tempered. It's almost like you have a very quiet confidence, but you're not, boastful, and you're not proud, or you're humble, but you have a sense of confidence about you.
Mm-hmm. I had the pleasure, Steve, of meeting you, Ken Edict, and some other of us as well who are on this session at the most recent Forbes School of Business and Technology Leader Summit that was held in California. And at that Leader Summit, we talked about all type of future directions, innovative directions, all very important for leaders in any walk that you may have, any industry. How important is it, as someone who is coming and preparing for an interview, to be able to speak to how they have leadership experience, exposure, how they've walked that walk in any level that they may have? How important is that leadership component?
Well, leadership is a very, very overused word. And I think that the leadership today has to be demonstrated, obviously, in action, and action that has been monitored. So if I speak to a young person and they had experience in the Boy Scouts, and then they went to Eagle Scouts, I know in my mind that they've had to do some things that would be relative to leadership. If you're in high school and then now you're in college, what did you do that you were in charge of? What did you do that you helped to build? What did you do so I'll ask questions like, for example, tell me a time when you were with a group of people and the direction wasn't going well, or the solutions weren't readily available. What did you do to step up to help that situation? That's part of the questions that I'll ask. Matter of fact, I actually got that from my coach. I have a coach, a business coach, and he said, you should ask that for leadership. What have they ever done to prove that they're willing to take a step in leadership? So, for me, if you're going to run a company, if you're going to start a business, then you have to have the ability to lead other people, or you're going to be there by yourself. Or if you're going to have clients, you're going to have to teach them things, and that takes a lot of leadership and preparation. So I'm constantly, that's a very good question, because I think we overlooked it, or we don't know how to find the right answers when we ask that question, right? I don't want to know that somebody who's on the playground and they're the ones that called everyone to the kickball game every day. That's great, and I'm glad you can do that. But have you ever built anything? Have you ever had to take control or help people make decisions in a way that showed your leadership? So that's a great question.
And then following or adding to it, as you're stressing that importance of demonstrating what you have done, how is it not too positive for you if I show up for the interview, you're asking me the questions, describe what you have done to demonstrate, be it leadership or demonstrate my knowledge of something, and I start answering with we did this, we did that, we blah blah.
Right. We is good, providing, every entity has a leader. So we did well, but what did you do specifically? We grew this. That's fantastic. What part did you play? We were successful in this entity. That's great. What part of that entity did you lead? So, if I'm asking a specific question, probably as you have and most of us have, we've had so many conversations. I don't want to say that's not what I asked you. This is what I'm asking you. But I can say it in a very kind way of saying, okay, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. But let's focus on you. So I think in the process of getting that information, yes, I've heard people try to step around it. And sometimes they try to be, depending on the culture, sometimes they'll try to be humble. They don't want to take the credit for it, which is not bad. But I want to specifically know, what did you do to make that change?
Very good, very good. Steve, how about some methods that individuals who are looking for a job, what they can reach out, what type of tools, what type of websites can they go to find those jobs? What would you recommend?
Well, here's what I would recommend. The first thing, one thing that's been very successful for a lot of candidates has been using their social media. The social media and personal introductions. So let's say, for example, I have a company I'm interested in. And so I'm going to go through my LinkedIn. I'm going to look at my LinkedIn. I may have 5, I may have 1,000 people in that LinkedIn. I can find out if I know anyone that works at that company. Once I find that person that works for that company, what I can then do is try to connect with them and say, hey, listen, I'm thinking about coming to work or trying to get an opportunity for an interview at your company. Can you give me some advice? I'd like to meet with you face to face. So the first thing I would tell you was get the contact, but don't try to do it over messaging. Don't try to do it over meet the person face to face and let them know you're serious. See who they know in areas of leadership that can help you to get to that opportunity. That's what I would do.
Very good. And you mentioned social media, LinkedIn, as an example. Yes. We live in a world, a society where social media is so important. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, you name it, right? We do all of those things. How important is it for an individual to watch the content that is placed in their social media areas? You as a recruiter, do you and your team look at those things? We've heard those stories of some people actually getting fired because of the type of information that has rolled in their social media area. What's your take on that?
I'm laughing because I have a son who's a graduate student, and I have another son who's at UCLA, and he's about to graduate next year. And one of my sons posted something. It wasn't outrageous. It wasn't, anything abnormal, but I thought it was not a good move. And I'll tell you why. What I mean is this: when you post something, it's an inner feeling that you're exposing outwardly. And whether you know it or whether you admit it or not, you're exposing something that you feel that may not be in line with the company's beliefs in terms of what they're looking for, right? So by misbehaving on the internet, if you will, and doing and acting and saying things that probably would not show up well in an interview, don't expose yourself like that. It's not worth it. You understand that you're one of many looking for an opportunity. They want people that are looking for that opportunity that are good citizens and that are not going to be problematic for them. Not to say that, little antics here and there as young people, we all have done bad, crazy, fun stuff. But you got to be careful today because people look at that totally differently. So it's very important. That's a great point. You need to be careful what you post. Post the good things, right? Nobody's perfect. We all know that we've done things, but post the good things that you. That will help you a lot better than posing being at the beach somewhere, with, in a beer contest and see if you can drink 400 beers. That's not going to help your interview process. Trust me.
Very good point. Very good point. Well, Steve, it looks like we have some questions rolling in from our session attendees. Kate, can you help us out there?
Absolutely. So I'm actually going to start with this one because I think it's really relevant. Can you provide information on how you should go about setting up a professional LinkedIn profile?
So, I called LinkedIn. I'll be very honest with you. I have a recruiter. I have an assistant who set all that up. So I called LinkedIn. I just happened to have contacted LinkedIn, and they provided for me some examples. And then I Googled some people that were experts at LinkedIn, and I told them what I was trying to do. And they said, here's the best way to get your message out about who you are and what you're actually trying to do. So there are coaches now, believe it or not, LinkedIn coaches, and they are great at messaging. They're great at putting everything that you've done, everything that you're looking for, all of the associations. They have all the things that the skill sets that other people can check. All of that, there's coaches for that right now. And I'm sure your school has coaches and people that are experts in this. So I just would look for people that are experts in that area. And that's where that would be my first step.
Okay. How would you want an applicant to answer one or two of the most difficult questions in an interview? First, what's your biggest weakness? And second, if you could work for any company, where would you work? Both are tricky questions for applicants. And can you also please provide us a sample of how an applicant should answer these questions?
So
just to recap, it's your biggest weakness, and yes. If you could work for any company, where would you work?
So the biggest weakness, I guess the best way for me to sort of analyze that answer would be whether or not they could actually just say, right off, it's like, hey, my biggest weakness is I know this is a career that I'd have to really be good at doing this, and I don't think I'm that good at that. And then I would say, well, what do you think that is? Well, I really haven't had, and so is it a will or is it a skill? So a weakness could be either of the two. If it's a will issue where they say, well, I just don't want to do that, that's one thing. But if someone says, Steve, I'm not really good at that, but if someone were to teach me that, I think I could be good at that. So I think it's basically determining whether it's will or skill. In regards to your second question about whether or not they would want to, what the company would be if they could do it. Hey, if I could work at this company, I'd work at it. My question would be obvious. Why aren't you? Have you tried to, get an interview? Have you tried, do you know anyone that works there? Is that really what you want to do? Let me see if I have any contacts, and I'll try to help you. Because ultimately, we want people that are going to be happy, right? We want people that have a passion. If someone said to me, Steve, I think this is a good career and a good opportunity, but if I could work at Qualcomm, man, that would just be the best thing in the world. And I may say, hey, I have an advisor of mine. He does a lot of work at Qualcomm. Let me see if I can introduce you to him, and maybe he can introduce you to one of his clients. And I would try to do that. So that would be the way I would answer that. You had a third question, and what was it?
It actually was just how you, a sample of how you could, applicants could answer it, which I think that you have.
So if they, again, as I said, if the weakness were a will or skill, I'll be able to determine that. In terms of the, the working, if I could work at another place, that's an emotional question, right? I mean, I wish I were in the NBA, but I'm only 6 foot tall. That could just be that type of an answer. Man, if I could do anything, I'd love to be a sports writer. Well, I didn't go to journalism school, so I'm never going to, but it'd be a great job. So I have to kind of discern whether or not it's just sort of a, off the cuff type of deal, or if that's really, really what they want to do. And I would help them. And depending on how the relationship has gone during the process, I would be able to, I think, understand whether or not that was just something, yeah, I'd like to, or no, I don't really want to do that. I want to do this, but if I had my dream, that would be it. So I just really depends on the way the attitude of the answer is, I think would be the best way for me to understand that. I hope that answers your question.
I think it did. Pete Lyman had that in the chat there, and I think it answered it. I have another question, since we're talking about weaknesses that may be asked during an interview. If Steve, you asked that question, me as an interviewee, can you describe your weaknesses? And I said, I really don't think I have any. Is that good? Is it bad?
Well, it depends, right? I mean, it depends on what they mean by that. So if I said, Karen, what do you think your weaknesses are? And you said, I really don't think I have any. I said, okay, so let me walk you through a process. What do you think you'd be best at out of these 6? Well, I think I'd be best at that. How about number 5? Well, I think I'd be really good at that. How about the 4th part of the process? Good. So when I got them down to the last one, I'd say, well, based on everything I just explained to you, this was the lowest. In other words, this was your weakness. So sometimes you have to walk them into it and back them into it. And then they say, well, yeah, maybe. And so then, because sometimes you don't know if they're trying to impress you or if they're just trying to, not seem like, hey, I'm not the right, I can do everything. So you kind of have to categorize. So what I use is a number system. I back them into it and say, so, out of the 6 things, you said this was the least. So this is your weakness. I call it an opportunity. I use the word opportunity. What do you think the opportunity is? What's the gap in your in the way you're doing things? Because I try to avoid words that I really don't want them to feel like I'm judging them. So I try to use opportunity. And I have other means that I can use, but I'll back them into it till they'll come back and go, yeah, you're right. Maybe that is. Okay, that's good. So I give them the benefit of the doubt, but I will back them into it though.
That's very good. And I like also with your process, you have the person to explain.
Yes.
Explain your answer. Identify
Yes.
why. Yes. Mm-hmm. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's see, panel members, do you guys have any questions for Steve as well?
I have a quick question. Let me go ahead and put my camera on. I know that feels sort of.
Hi, Kate.
So I've been hearing a little bit about, it's been quite some time since I have interviewed externally, but my husband is going to be graduating from nursing school soon. As far as the resumes that are coming in, are they lending themselves towards more like photographs, videos? 10 years ago when I was interviewing, you still tried to get everything on maybe 1 or 2 pages. You summarized what your strengths were at the top, and just kind of looking for ideas on how to even, have, of course, if you have a foot in the door with someone, obviously that's going to be a better option. But if you're just, handing it in cold along with everybody else's resume, just kind of your thoughts on how fancy you should get with it.
So here's my philosophy. Connect the dots. So if I go to look for a position that they're looking for A, B, C, and D, can I do A, B, C, and D? And if I can, then show me where you've done A, B, C, or D. Because if I'm looking at a resume and I'm hiring for this, and you say in your resume, or you write in your resume that you can do this, then it streamlines for what I'm looking for. I just think of it as a common sense approach. If I'm looking for this type of person and you have done that, and if you've done your homework, this is what they're hiring for, then you should articulate that in a way that lines up with what they're looking for. If you can't and if you haven't, then you're probably not going to get hired anyway. But if you have done something that's relatable to what they're looking for, that's what you should accentuate, in my opinion. Does that make sense? People aren't looking for fancy, at least I don't. I don't hire resumes,
Okay.
I hire people.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Trevor, did you have a question there?
Yeah, I used to work with a hiring manager, and she would ask the candidate their favorite quote. That was just like a random question, but she placed a heavy emphasis on their response. For example, if their response was, well, I've always liked the quote, do unto others as they do unto you, or something like that, to her that spoke volumes, I guess. I just wonder what you thought about questions like that.
I hate to say this, but I've never really asked that question because I'm a little bit afraid of the fact that they wouldn't really know how to answer that. They may have heard something in school and they like it. I don't know if kids live on quotes anymore. I'm not sure. I think that's a great question. I wouldn't want to ask a candidate that with the thought that they may not be able to answer it and feel like, oh, I just blew this interview because I didn't have a great quote. So, I think if they answer well on that, that's great. And if they didn't, then I don't know how to really answer you to give you. I think it's really kind of a subjective question where I think if that's what you do, then I would say to the candidate during the process, I may ask you for that. Because I always think if I'm asking you if you're going to be prepared, then maybe I'd say to them, hey, here's the process we're going to take. And if they answer that question, then so be it. And if they didn't have a favorite quote or they didn't have any quote, then how would I judge that? So I don't really know if that would be a weighing factor for me, but I think it's a good question.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think you're right. I think it is subjective. It was always just an interesting practice that stood out to me.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate the insights and the knowledge you've shared today. So I just wondered what you thought about that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Hey, Steve, I have a question for you. In your experience as you interview and hire, are most of your candidates coming directly from college or from other companies?
Well, oddly enough, believe it or not, they're coming from our other advisors. Our number one source of bringing in new talent to our company is coming from our own advisors and coming from other companies. So we can look at hiring directly from college. We can go out and try to meet people in different venues that have other careers and try to recruit them into our business. But our most successful way has been bringing in agents through our other advisors. And then secondly, what's really been useful for us is the clients that we have. We have millions of clients throughout the country. And sometimes our advisors will say, hey, I have a client of mine who's just an exceptional person. I think they do well here. And so we'll interview them and hire them in.
So that word of mouth goes far today.
It's not a tough process. Find somebody that works where you'd like to work. Meet the person face to face. Tell them why you want to work there, what your passion is, and if they could somehow just get an interview for you. If people did that more oftenly, they'd be surprised how effective it could be.
I agree, because people are willing. I remember talking to a lot of our not Ford School of Business and Technology, but just in the community, young people, and they'll tell me what they're interested in doing once they're done with school. And I will ask them, oh, okay, if you wanted to be an accountant, do you know any accountants? Have you spoken to any accountants? And a lot of times they'll say no. But like you're describing, this world is too big, too full with experienced people, and we have the technology and tools to link us, such as LinkedIn, such as anything in social media where we're connected. We have too much of an opportunity to let that pass us by.
it's connecting the dots. I know it's simplistic, and I know most of you here are very, very smart people, much smarter than I am, but my simple way of thinking is just connect the dots, right? If you connect the dots, you'll get a lot for it. Common sense really does work. And really, if I were looking for a job today or a career, that would be my first approach. Who do I know that works there that can give me an opportunity to just get in front of somebody? And if the person is reputable and they go to the HR department or the recruiting department and say, hey, look, I want you to meet this lady named Karen. She'd be a tremendous asset to our company. She just graduated from college, or she's a job changer. You need to meet this person. If that person's credible, they'll meet them. They will meet them, and they'll give them an opportunity if it's there to get. So I really think that the personal touch is still effective.
That's wonderful, wonderful. Let's see, Amjad. I thought I saw you pop up there. Did you have a question? If not, again, just opening up, it seems like, Kate, do you have any more questions in our chat area?
Dr. Ivy, this is Dr. Lamone. I do have one question for Steve. And my question is, when you connect the dots, have you ever had to bring in someone who you needed for a technical job? And mainly, maybe it was for coding or securing a server. Have you ever had to give them a hands-on interview where you'd say, okay, well then I want you to write me a little snippet of code and I want you to go configure this router? That is my question.
Okay, good. So in my world, let's take that same analogy and say I have a financial advisor who is a planner. And he says, you know, I'd love to come in and help your team because I have an advanced degree in financial planning, and I think I can be an asset in this arena, estate planning, or I can be an asset with high net worth people or retirement planning. So in that case, what I will do is I'll call my own company's estate planning attorneys or my own advanced planning attorneys or advanced planners and say, hey, I'm looking at a candidate here. And what I'd like to do is do a case prep with this person. I'm going to give them a scenario, and what I'd like to see them do is what kind of a solution you come. I was, matter of fact, literally yesterday, a gentleman that I'm bringing into our firm, that's exactly what I did. I put him on the phone with 3 or 4 of our company resource people, and we're walking through a scenario because I do think he can be an asset, and though I believe him, I just want to verify. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Steve, you are contributing so well. This is such good content you are providing to us. I've taken some good notes as well, and I like your point system. Yeah. And I also like a point that you said as far as when someone is involved in an interview, they should be listening.
Very much so.
You may echo questions back to them with information either you shared or they received in the next level interview, and you're expecting them to be able to, this is what I've learned from being here. I think that's just wonderful insight there.
You know, Karen, one of the things that my coach taught me years ago, and he got me on it every time, he'd ask me a question and he'd explain something to me, and then he'd say, so Steve, tell me what you're thinking. And every time I'd answer him, it'd be like I knew he was going to ask me. And so intentionally, I would be thinking more. And so I find that during the process, when I am interviewing people, I'll say something. He'll say something like this. I'm going to give you a new idea. And then once I give you that new idea, I want you to tell me what you're thinking as I'm explaining it to you. And so he'd ask me something, or he'd say something, he'd say, no, Steve, what are you thinking as I say this? I'd say, I was thinking about this. Why did your mind take you down this road? Tell me why you started thinking this way. And what he was trying to tell me was that he can better understand how to coach me if he knows the way I think. And so then he can ask questions that will take me off the way I would regularly think, just to try to realign me and say, okay, well, here's what I really meant to ask you, or here's what I really want, or here's what I thought you would be thinking. And so it was constantly trying to learn. So tell me what you're thinking. Well, I thought this. No, that wasn't even part of what I was explaining to you. So it's a good way in my mind of getting people just to open up. And the other question is, tell me more. Simple question. So what does that mean to you? Or that means a lot of things to a lot of people, but what specifically does that mean to you? And they're like, oh, okay, he really wants to know what I'm thinking. Okay, here's what and so I find those little simple questions like that will get people to open up. And I really find that the more they open up, the better you get to know them and the better you can make a selection decision.
Well, Steve, I echo someone actually put, Nuzila put in the chat there, that is a great way to coach. That is a great way to interview as well. And just in wrapping us up in this session, I want to say thank you. Thank you tremendously for your insight, for your wisdom that you shared during the session. My takeaway that I've gained from it, and I'm sure all of those who attended as well, not only from a person, say, if I'm seeking a job and looking from a job, you provided great points there, but you shared an awful lot as being on the other side of the chair. So if I am the person who, is doing the interviewing, how to listen better to the person I'm interviewing, how to ask questions and ask questions in a way that helps them to think as well as they are in that seat, because that could be a very nervous position there, but understanding that as the recruiter, as the hiring manager, you provided some great insights to us today, both sides of the fence. And so we thank you.
You're very welcome. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. This wraps up our session. Ken, did you want to come on board and close us out here?
Steve, I just want to thank you again. We met briefly over at the Forbes Leadership Summit, and luckily you got your message out on what you did in the first few minutes, and it's exactly the skill set we needed for today. So I really want to thank you for helping out, and I hope someday to be sending you over some great graduates that you can put to work in New York life.
Okay. It was great to have met you, and thank you for this opportunity, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a great day.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.